His throat was cut so deeply the blade reached his spine. 3,000 years later, scientists X-raying his mummy found the wound still there, packed with linen bandages by the embalmers, hidden under his wrappings, concealed from history. Ramesses III, one of the greatest pharaohs who ever lived, was assassinated by his own family inside his own palace. And for 3,000 years, nobody knew. This is the story of the most spectacular royal murder in human history and the ancient trial that followed it. But here is what makes this story truly extraordinary. This was not just a murder. This was a conspiracy involving at least 40 people, including a royal wife, her son who wanted the throne, senior palace officials, army commanders, and even the women of the royal harem. They planned it for months. They used black magic. They forged official documents. They bribed royal guards. And they almost got away with it completely. What stopped them, and how we know every detail of their plan, is one of the most remarkable documents ever found in Egypt. A papyrus scroll written at the time of the trial, with names, with confessions, with punishments. All of it recorded, all of it survived. This is the story of the harem conspiracy and the ancient murder that modern science finally proved 3,000 years later. To understand why his murder was so shocking and so carefully hidden, you need to understand who Ramesses III was. He reigned from approximately 1186 to 1155 BC. He was the last great warrior pharaoh of Egypt. Twice he repelled the Sea Peoples, mysterious invaders who had already destroyed the Hittites, collapsed Mycenae, and erased civilizations across the Mediterranean. While every other major power of the Bronze Age fell in the catastrophe of 1200 BC, Egypt survived because of Ramesses III. His victory at the Battle of the Delta, depicted in extraordinary detail on the walls of his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, is one of the greatest military victories in ancient history. He also defeated the Libyans twice. He built on a scale that rivaled his famous predecessor, Ramesses II. He was revered as a living god. He was the shield of Egypt. And someone inside his own palace put a knife to his throat. By the end of his reign, Ramesses III had a serious problem. He had multiple wives and multiple sons, and the question of succession, who would become pharaoh after him, had become dangerous. His chief queen, Ti, was ambitious. She had a son, a prince named Pentuer. But Pentuer was not the designated heir. The designated heir was a different prince from a different mother. Ti refused to accept this, and so she began to plan. The judicial papyrus of Turin, the trial record found in the 19th century, lists the conspirators by name. Queen Ti is identified as the primary instigator. Pentuer is listed as her instrument, but the conspiracy goes far deeper. 28 men from the royal harem administration, military officers who controlled palace security, a royal butler who had direct access to the pharaoh, the overseer of the royal cattle, who somehow obtained copies of official documents to forge guard change orders. Women of the harem recruited to pass messages and use their access to the pharaoh to weaken him. In the ancient world, the harem was not just a place of pleasure. It was an administrative center, a political hub, and now a base of operations for regicide. The assassination attempt took place during the beautiful Feast of the Valley, one of Egypt's most sacred annual religious festivals. The timing was deliberate. The festival brought chaos to the usual palace routines. Guards were distracted. Security was thinner than normal. Crowds gathered around the temples. The conspirators had been preparing for months. The forged guard change documents had already moved sympathetic or bribed soldiers into key positions. Harem women had been feeding the pharaoh substances. The judicial papyrus mentions potions designed to weaken him, cloud his judgment, make him vulnerable. And then, in the night, they came for him. We do not know exactly how many attackers entered the pharaoh's private chambers. The papyrus is deliberately vague on the specific details of the killing itself. What we know from the 2012 CT scan is the result. A deep horizontal cut across Ramses III's throat, severing the trachea and reaching the vertebrae of the spine. A professional killing strike, instantly fatal. The greatest pharaoh of his age died in the dark, in his own bed, in his own palace, surrounded by people he trusted. And here is the strangest part of the entire story. The conspiracy succeeded in killing Ramesses III, but it failed completely at its actual goal. Pentuer never became pharaoh. The designated heir, Ramesses IV, took the throne, which means that sometime between the assassination and the coronation, the conspiracy was exposed. But by whom? The papyrus does not tell us who discovered the plot. It tells us only that it was discovered, that 41 people were brought to trial, and that Ramesses IV himself presided over the judgment. This creates one of the most intriguing mysteries in all of Egyptian history. Did Ramesses III know the assassination was coming and leave instructions for his son? Did a loyalist within the conspiracy betray the others? Was there a second faction within the palace that exposed the first? The papyrus is silent. 3,000 years of silence, broken only by the names of the guilty and the punishments that followed. The trial that followed was extraordinary by any historical standard. 41 people were brought before a specially convened court of 12 judges, including military officers, royal scribes, and palace officials. The charges were read, the confessions were taken, and the judicial papyrus of Turin recorded everything. What makes this document so remarkable is its honesty. Egyptian official records almost never admitted failure or scandal. They recorded victories, not conspiracies, gods, not murders. But someone, possibly Ramesses IV himself, decided that every detail of this betrayal would be preserved, every name, every act, every punishment. The accused were divided into groups by their level of involvement. The inner circle, those who planned and executed the murder, received the harshest sentences. Several were condemned to death. Others were forced to take their own lives on the spot in the presence of the court. Some had their noses and ears cut off. Prince Pentuer, the queen's son for whom all of this had been done, was condemned to a uniquely terrible fate. He was allowed to take his own life, but his body would receive no proper burial. No mummification, no tomb, no afterlife. For an ancient Egyptian, this was not merely execution. This was the destruction of the eternal soul. After the trial, an extraordinary decision was made. The official records of Egypt would show Ramesses III as dying of natural causes. The mummy was wrapped with the wound carefully concealed beneath layers of linen. The reign of Ramesses IV began without public scandal. Egypt continued. And the judicial papyrus, the one document that recorded everything, was filed away in an archive and forgotten. Not destroyed, just hidden. Why? Possibly because the new pharaoh Ramesses IV did not want his legitimacy questioned. A pharaoh whose father was publicly murdered was a pharaoh whose divine protection could be doubted. Far better for Egypt and for Ramesses IV if the official story was natural death, smooth succession, divine continuity. The cover-up worked perfectly for 3,000 years, until 1855, when the judicial papyrus of Turin was identified and translated by German scholar Heinrich Breusch, and until 2012, when a team of Egyptian and Swiss scientists finally put the mummy in a CT scanner. Among the royal mummies found in Egypt, there is one that has puzzled scientists for over a century. Known only as the Screaming Mummy, or Unknown Man E, it was found in the Deir el-Bahari royal cache in 1881, alongside the greatest pharaohs of Egypt. But it was clearly different. Its face is frozen in a horrific, open-mouthed expression, as if screaming or in agony at the moment of death. It was wrapped in sheepskin, an impure material by Egyptian religious standards, used for those considered unworthy of proper burial. It was given no coffin with a proper name, no canopic jars, no protective amulets, no Book of the Dead. Everything that an Egyptian needed for the afterlife, this body was deliberately denied. In 2012, the same year scientists proved Ramesses III's murder, DNA analysis of the screaming mummy was conducted. The results were clear. The screaming mummy was a direct male line descendant of Ramesses III, almost certainly his son. And everything about the body, the deliberate humiliation of the burial, the expression of agony, the denial of afterlife protection, is entirely consistent with one specific punishment from the judicial papyrus: the punishment given to Prince Pentaur. In 2012, a team of scientists led by Egyptologist Zahi Hawass and forensic pathologist Ashraf Salim put the mummy of Ramses III into a CT scanner. They already had the judicial papyrus. They already suspected murder. But suspicion is not proof. The CT scan provided proof. The scan revealed a wound 7 centimeters deep running horizontally across the pharaoh's throat, cutting through the trachea and reaching the cervical vertebrae at the base of the spine. A cut that deep in that location is instantly fatal. There was no possibility of survival. The embalmers had attempted to conceal it, packing the wound with linen and wrapping the entire neck area tightly. For 3,000 years, the concealment had worked, but modern medical imaging sees through 3,000 years of linen without difficulty. The findings were published in the British Medical Journal. The cause of death of Ramses III, the last great warrior pharaoh of Egypt, was officially confirmed: homicide. But here is the final twist, the one that makes this story truly extraordinary. Queen T wanted her son to rule Egypt. She destroyed the greatest pharaoh of the age to achieve it. She failed. Pentaur never took the throne. His soul was condemned to non-existence. But consider what actually happened. The judicial papyrus, the document recording every detail of the conspiracy, survived. The mummy of Ramses III, with its concealed wound, survived. The screaming mummy of Pentaur, with its expression of eternal agony, survived. 3,000 years later, the murder was proven. The conspiracy was proven. Every guilty name was confirmed. In trying to seize power and be forgotten as criminals, the conspirators achieved the opposite. They are the most famous murderers in ancient history. Ramses III is known forever as the pharaoh who was assassinated. Pentaur is known forever as the screaming mummy. And Queen T, the woman who planned it all, achieved a kind of immortality she never intended. In the end, it was not Ramses IV who preserved the memory of his father's murder. It was the very people who committed it.